People who've seen nice people finally snap. What happened? Story 1. This woman, Mary, who I worked with, was always pleasant and cheerful, said hello in the lunchroom, and was generally liked. She worked in finance on special projects. She said she wanted to retire in a few years, and she had been working there for 15 years. Her boss started pressuring her to complete our annual budget report faster. But this thing is huge, comprehensive, and a symbolic beast. Mary told the boss it would be ready in a couple of weeks per the usual schedule. The boss said that it needed to be completed within 1 week to give it to the higher-ups. Mary said it was impossible. The boss emailed Mary plus CC to a bunch of coworkers and the assistant managers, calling Mary out for poor work ethic and for making the department look bad. Mary said it wasn't possible and didn't appreciate being tormented. She put in her notice to retire by the end of the week, leaving her boss high and dry. She was the only one who could do the budget report on time, so the department was double screwed. Good for her. I hope Mary had replied to all in that email to say she didn't appreciate being treated like that, because that would have been epic. Story 2. She was an assistant manager who was known for being soft-spoken. At a manager meeting, one of the general managers, who was known for being a complete a-hole to everyone, was going off on how every store should be run. Well, she snapped. You have the highest turnover rate out of any store in the district. You can't keep employees for more than 6 months before they just quit with everyone saying you were the problem. Maybe you should take that advice you're giving us and use it on yourself. She put in her 2 weeks' notice, not even 3 days later. The manager who she yelled at was transferred to a different location outside of that district. The store he managed has since bounced back and has been doing very well. Story 3. I take my cat to the vet who also has 100 cats living at the clinic. Some of them are just unsociable, some are blind or have horrible handicaps, and the clinic provides hospice care for still others. Long story short, the doctor, her staff, and her volunteers are all saints. Unfortunately, word has gotten out and some people now think of the clinic as the place where you can dump unwanted cats, which they really can't. It's already at capacity. Anyhow, I'm waiting one day for a routine checkup and this woman, covered with jewelry and expensive clothes, walks in with a perfectly healthy-looking cat. She tells the woman behind the counter, "I'm leaving town, I can't take the cat, so I'm donating it to you guys." The employee explains that no, that's not a sweater in your hands and this isn't Goodwill. It doesn't work that way. Oblivious to her surroundings, there are maybe a dozen people there. Between patient parents and staff, the visiting woman isn't even making an effort to talk discreetly. After being refused, she says, "Fine, if you don't take the cat, I'm just going to dump it on the street." She has a brief stare down with the woman behind the counter, maybe assuming that she can guilt the clinic into taking her cat, then walks away. Another customer, a big beefy guy, who's been watching this, intercepts the woman before she can get to the door. He proceeds to say something so vivid that I wish I could repeat it verbatim, but I can paraphrase it with some highlights. "Lady, you want to dump the cat? Fine, I'm going to give you what you want. I'll take your cat. But the price is that I'm going to berate you in front of everyone here. You're useless. You're so goddamn selfish you won't even cough up 69 cents a day for a can of Friskies. You don't deserve the generosity of the people who work here. Do you want to blackmail them into preventing a cat accident? You disgust me. If you weren't a woman, I'd punch you right now. Now out of my sight before I decide that it'd be worth it to do it anyway." By now, the doctor has shown up. She doesn't know exactly what's happening, but it's gotten pretty loud. She doesn't like people swearing at other people in her waiting room. It's bad for business. The guy says to her, "Look, you're probably used to it, but I get angry when I see people who mistreat animals." Story 4. I worked at Goodwill for a while when I was younger. I was a job coach for high-functioning autistic adults. A regional manager came to our store one day to make adjustments. One of the adults I was a job coach for had trichophasia, so she had a big bald spot that she would cover with a clip-on pink hair lock. This regional decided to tell her that she needed to go home and dye her hair a natural color because she was breaking the company dress code. She started crying and I told her not to worry because I would handle it. I explained to him the situation and he had no sympathy. My store manager at the time got involved and tore him a new one. She reprimanded him of the mission statement, providing job opportunities to individuals with special needs, that he used to chain smoke cigarettes on company time, and that climbing the corporate ladder for Goodwill Industries was nothing to be proud of. She ended it with, "Your name is Jarrett. That's not even a real name." We had time cards at the time, and we let the girl go home and clocked her out at the end of her shift. That burn on the dude's name was epic. That store manager was classy in the way she snapped, but the teacher in Story 8 surprised everyone. Story 5. A long time ago, I used to do call center tech support for fairly complex issues. A nice, quiet guy went through the same training class. He talked if you talked to him, but never went out of his way to chat. Right after training, the call center changes a ton of stuff. We start getting squeezed on the amount of time we can do documentation, how much research time we have, and just metrics in general. It was all BS because the favorites got to go on smoke breaks as often as they wanted with the managers. We'd essentially be punished for that because we had to keep the average numbers in a certain area. He did all the right things. We talked to his manager, then to their manager, then to HR. It kept getting worse, plus it was enforced overtime. Then he got a super long call, he was on it for at least 2 hours, about a complex issue, and the customer was just straight up being cruel to him, but he had to take it because the managers wouldn't permit him to hang up. They were screaming at him to resolve the issue and get to his next call, but we couldn't end calls. The customer had to. One day, he just stood up, stepped onto his chair, then onto his desk, threw his headset on the desk, and sort of growled something like, "Screw this," quietly. He looked around, staring people in the face, especially the people who took those long breaks and the managers. Then he walked out, and no one ever saw him again. Everyone was super quiet and afraid to move or say much of anything. Story 6. I used to manage a pub in a small rural town, population around 300, in Australia. Running the pub was mostly a business of maintaining peace between the itinerant oil and gas workers and the local cattle industry families who resented their presence. The flashpoint for this conflict was frequently the jukebox in the bar. The oil and gas guys were usually city folks on fly-in, fly-out rotations, so their musical tastes somewhat differed from the locals. Anyway, so there's a guy we'll call Brian who is the heir apparent to one of the larger cattle empires in the district. Super cool guy, everyone liked him. Would give you the shirt on his back sort of thing. Brian had a daughter who'd just married and was pregnant with her first child. Sometime during pregnancy, she'd noticed a dodgy-looking blemish on her bum, though she figured she'd wait until she had the kid to get it looked at. Months later, she had the kid, and she goes to get it checked. Skin cancer metastasized everywhere. Weeks to live. There's a huge funeral. Brian is destroyed. At the end of the church service, there's a procession of vehicles out to the cemetery. Some Halliburton truck, impatient to be caught behind it, plows down the side of the road and spews dust over the whole thing. From then on, Brian would be down at the pub every other night. He'd get half drunk and then put the "If I Die Young" song on the jukebox that was popular like 10 years ago. The man was circling the drain, but nobody knew what to do about it. Anyway, one night, Brian's at the bar and the song is on the jukebox. Some guys in Halliburton patched hi-fis and started complaining about the song choice. I told them just to leave it be, but one of them got up and unplugged the jukebox. Brian plugs it back in and puts the song on again. One of the Halliburton guys calls Brian a depressing old man. Brian curses back at him and, well, I don't remember who threw the first punch, but between the fight starting and the couple of seconds it took me to break it up, Brian did enough to put the guy in an ambulance. Story 7. When I was in high school, my group of 6 friends was sitting at a round table in the cafeteria for breakfast. A table over, some girls had been tossing small chunks of their food in our direction. My one friend, M, wore her hair in an unusual spiked-up style, and I guess the girls at the table were trying to land food in her hair while cackling to themselves. My quiet, sweet, introverted friend, K, was getting so angry that I swear steam was coming out of her ears. One of the girls had thrown a decent-sized piece of her egg patty at us, and it landed on the floor near K's foot. K proceeded to step on the egg patty, pick it up off the ground, walk over to the table of girls, and shove the egg directly into the mouth of the one who had thrown it. She and her friends stood up and were like, "OMG, no, what is wrong with you?" with much yelling and cuffing, and Kay just walked back to our table. We were all staring in shock. Of course, a teacher got involved, and both parties got in trouble. The other girls said they were going to fight us for a week afterward, but nobody ever did anything. To this day, we're all still like, I can't believe she did that. That was such an amazing moment in my high school memory. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, as Kay was the last person I would have expected to do that. Of course, she did get in trouble, but she didn't regret it one bit. Well, that was an excellent move. Story 8. Back in 5th grade, I was super lucky to have the elementary school's favorite teacher. Every single student loved her. My class was always super loud and annoying. We were working on some assignments before PE, and everyone was passing by her. She was only allowing students to go out if they finished the assignment. I was unfortunately one of the last kids in the room. This one student, who was a god-awful and annoying kid, was being way over the top. My teacher got up, put her hands over her ears, and just started screaming, "Shut up! Just shut up! Shut up!" And she stomped out of the room, still screaming with her hands covering her ears. All of us just sat there in horror. A couple of kids just left to go to PE, and I sat there just trying to finish the assignment. Our principal came into the room a few minutes later, just telling the rest of us to go out to PE, but she made the annoying kid stay in the room with her. He was moved into the other 5th grade teacher's room after this. She was completely normal and fine after coming back, and there was nothing else that went wrong for the rest of the year. She just worked hard and made all of us love her with her caring soul and all of that fun stuff, but that moment completely traumatized me. Story 9. A lady where I used to work was subjected to constant pestering by a much older coworker, and the company failed to do anything about it. He was showing up at her house, eventually forcing her to move. After she moved into the new house, he bought the house next door. One day, she arrived at work with a baseball bat and stopped at the reception to ask if Tom was in. When they asked why, she calmly told them she was there to end him. She walked upstairs to his office, reception called ahead and had him take the fire escape, and she instead demolished his office until the police arrived. She was not charged. The company and police knew she had announced her intentions to reception as a cry for help, so she didn't find him because it was clear that if she found him, she would have gone through with her plans for him. She took some sick leave and eventually returned to work, and the company put her on a project with this guy as her manager, because who cares about protecting victimized women, right? He behaved himself after she got back, and they moved her to a different manager after the project ended. I kind of love the fact that she scared him so much, because scaring people is equivalent to them being punished in a legit way. Man, I'm enjoying these stories about people getting served. If you like them as much as I do, then hit that like button. And if you want more satisfying videos like this one, subscribe to my channel. I've got more where that came from. Story 10. One of my middle school friends, whom we'll call Bob, was about a half foot shorter than everyone else. Everyone was around 5 feet. He was an interesting, in a good way, dude. He was interested in learning, played video games, and was great to hang out with, but he looked scrawny. He didn't look like he could hurt anything if I'm being honest. For some context to the story, our gym teacher was a grade A a-hole. He gave nicknames, some good, some bad, to everyone. He was always sarcastic, always berating everyone, speaking down to us instead of encouraging them. One day, the gym teacher says something about Bob's mom. Bob's mom had fibromyalgia and some other conditions, making her weak and unhealthy, not by choice, and something in Bob snapped. Bob completely took down this 6.5-foot monster gym teacher. The gym teacher looked like he stood no chance at the time. They were quickly pulled apart, and Bob got expelled and had to move schools, while the gym teacher was fired for fighting a student and being an overall a-hole. Story 11. There was a kid in my school in about 7th grade. His name was Frederick. He was loved by everyone, was so nice, and donated to charity regularly. Everyone knew and respected him. One day, a new kid came to our school. We'll name him Josh. Josh was a big dirtbag. He roughed up people, pushed them around, and threw food at people during lunch, which was honestly a big pain in the neck. Well, one day he decided to pick on Fred by doing his normal crap, and Frederick just went ballistic, punching, screaming, and kicking. They were both suspended for 2 or 3 days. After their suspension, they both came back, and Josh looked awful. Josh thought everyone would start to hate Fred after what he did to him. But nope, everyone was tired of his crap and picked on him for how bad he looked. Fred was just loved more for this incident. However, he told me he got grounded for a week. Story 12. During my freshman and sophomore years, the same kid gave me trouble at the bus stop and the whole walk home. Every single day, nonstop pestering just kept needling me constantly. So many people asked me why I took it, but I was just really shy and passive at that age. I stayed quiet and didn't react. One day, the kid tried to push me into some bushes thinking it'd be funny. He'd never gotten physical before. I grabbed his wrist and pushed him down. When he tried to get up, I put the past 2 years into a single hit that put him right back down. The next day in school, the kid had the darkest black eye I'd ever seen. He wasn't at the stop for the next few days, and when he started taking it again, he never said another word. I shocked a bunch of people, but it turns out lots of other kids hated this guy and were jealous that I gave him what he had coming. It did a lot of good for me, and the positive reaction kind of helped me come out of my shell. 10 out of 10. Would do it again. That 2-year punch must have been so satisfying. Story 13. My second cousin is a successful engineer and was running a great catering business on the side. Unfortunately, he was terrible at picking his women. He had this horrible, ungrateful leech as a girlfriend, and good lord, she was a complete piece of crap. She spent his money, constantly complained, and was disrespectful to his parents, the whole 9 yards. So one time they were at this huge catering gig and the girl was screaming at the catering staff. And when my cousin intervened, she told him to mind his own goddamn business. Wow. Okay, so I don't condone violence against women, but she straight up deserved what my cousin did next. He gave her the mightiest 1-2 slap he could muster and told her to get out and give back every cent he spent on her. Then he promptly threw her out of the gathering. A year later, he is happily married to a mutual friend of ours who more than deserves the kind of man he is. Story 14. An acquaintance of mine, Daryl, was always a quiet kid who bothered nobody. Given that he was 6'5" and 250 pounds, he played football and was generally respected and liked. One day in Spanish class, the class clown was making his usual rounds until he got to this one girl, Nellie. He never really made fun of people of the opposite gender, so everyone around him was telling him to get lost. But he kept going and finally got to the birthmark on her neck that was very large and dark red. He told her that it dropped her a few numbers down. At this point, just about everyone and their grandma in the class was standing up about to rush him, save for Daryl and a few others, until Daryl got up, waltzed over to the class clown, picked him up by his hair and said, and I quote, "If you don't shut up right now, I'm going to put you through that wall," and pointed to the nearest wall. He dropped the clown and walked away. A few seconds later, with his band of merry men behind him, the clown tries to jump Daryl in the middle of the class. Daryl then proceeds to elbow him across the room. By this point, security was called and both Daryl and the clown were arrested, with both only getting fines for damages. Every day, the spackle patch where the hole used to be humbles me. Story 15. This super nice guy at my school got into one fight at our school when the senior wouldn't stop picking on freshmen, teasing, roughing him up, and all other sorts of things. One day, when he saw the senior start up again, we were juniors, he just walked over and with absolutely no preamble, no talking, not even a, hey, leave him alone, just laid into him and absolutely wrecked the senior. Everyone just watched. Nobody had any idea he had that sort of fight in him, and when it was over, he just walked back and sat down at the table like nothing happened. The senior tried to get him in trouble for it, but none of the teachers believed him because of who it was. Nobody offered to be his witness either because we just thought he deserved it in general. A few years later, I asked why, and apparently the senior had made fun of the kid for living in a shelter. Their family had just escaped the cruel father. What I didn't know then was that he and his family were living in a shelter. It just made him snap. Story 16. I'm a journalist, as in every daily newspaper. The office is one constant noisy brawl, papers flying about, editors yelling at each other, chief editors yelling at editors, etc. So in comes Steve. Steve is a God-driven dude who is quiet and introverted. He's been working as a page designer for over a decade. He never swears, he never shouts, and he never even shows a sign of discomfort. On a very stressful day, with a half hour to go until print and half our systems non-operational, there are approximately 7 people over Steve telling him what to do simultaneously, including the editor-in-chief and the chief executive of the journal. Around them, about 40 more people are preparing for the next day's edition, with all the yelling and shouting I mentioned before. Steve stops. Steve kindly removes his glasses. Steve pushes his keyboard slowly out of the way and climbs on his desk. Steve releases a primeval cry to get everyone's attention and goes, "Either you all stop right now or I'm gonna be doing something to make you shut up." No one talked after that, no one laughed at Steve, and a few people even forgot to breathe for a few seconds from the shock. We've called him Bad Mofo Steve ever since, and we even got him the same wallet as Sam L. Jackson has in Pulp Fiction. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you'll also enjoy what made you stop being the nice guy. Story 5 is quite an eye-opener. See you on that video.